Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you this morning. I am the Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. I am the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I use he, him pronouns. I'm so happy that you decided to join us this morning. We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Connie Diamant, your worship associate for today. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour afterward, online or in person. We're so delighted you could join us today, so welcome.
So this is the month of August. We don't have a Soul Matters theme, which is many UU congregations use Soul Matters themes during 10 months of the year, so we choose our own themes in July and August, and our theme this month is Foundations of Unitarian Universalism. Last Sunday, that means that I talked about transforming the world through liberating love, which is from our Unitarian Universalist Association's covenant, part of our purpose. In the section on our purpose, it says that we transform the world through liberating love. And we talked about how we, as Unitarian Universalists, historically, you can believe what you like as an individual UU, but historically, we have believed that it's up to us to create a world in such a way that people will thrive. So that means dismantling oppressive structures and putting in place inclusive, welcoming, nurturing, supportive structures so that every person thrives and flourishes. So that's what I talked about last Sunday. Next Sunday, I'm going to talk about our new Unitarian Universalist values. We are a living tradition, so we recently adapted our 7 principles into 6 values. So I'm going to talk about those values next week, and specifically, I'm hoping to give you some tools or some insight into how to incorporate those values into our everyday life. So, and I have to say, actually, that sermon was also inspired by some of our new members. So I'm excited. I listen and I pay attention to what you all are bringing to the table, and I'm often very inspired by what you bring to the table. The following Sunday, we have a guest in the pulpit, Emily Parker, who's a candidate for Unitarian Universalist ministry, will be here talking about the history of our flaming chalice that we're going to light in a moment. And then Reverend Morgan McLean will be here on the last Sunday of the month. So this Sunday, we're going to talk about 2 of the defining features that are related of Unitarian Universalism. One is that we draw from multiple sources, and the other is that we encourage theological diversity. So that's what I'm going to talk about today in a slightly quirky, hopefully fun way. So with that, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join in our chalice lighting words, which are an abbreviated form of those new 6 values. So all together, love is at the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish, honor the web of life, be beloved community, cultivate generosity, celebrate diversity, and transform the world with love.
There must be a God somewhere over my head. I see angels in the air over my head. I see angels in the air over my head. I see angels in the air. There must be a God. There must be a God. There must be a God somewhere.
Just a note that a lot of you know already, but particularly for newcomers, Brad encouraged you to interpret that there must be a God somewhere in your own way of what that God might be, but you also don't have to believe that there must be a God somewhere at all as Unitarian Universalists. So just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that.
Good morning. I'm Olivia Tuggle. I'm the chair of the Children and Youth Spiritual Development Committee. This summer, the youth have chosen to discuss the Holy Troublemakers curriculum. It's an opportunity for them to learn about social justice activists from other faith traditions. Today I'm reading a book by Sandy Eisenberg Saso, and I read her short biography, and I think she's a pretty remarkable woman. She's the second woman to be ordained as a rabbi in 1974, and the first rabbi to become a mother. She and her husband, Dennis, were the first rabbinical couple to jointly lead a congregation, Beth El Zedek in Indianapolis. They have 2 children, David and Deborah. This book's called God's Name by Sandy Eisenberg Saso, illustrated by Phoebe Stone. After God created the world, all things on earth were given a name. The plants and the trees, the animals and the fish, and each person, young and old, had a special name. But no one knew the name of God. So each person searched for God's name. The farmer, whose skin was dark like the rich brown earth from which all things grew, called God source of life. The girl whose skin was as golden as the sun had turned night into day, called God creator of light. The man who tended sheep in the alley called God shepherd. The tired soldier who fought too many wars called God maker of peace. The artist who carved figures from the earth's hard stone called God my rock. Sometimes the people who called God by different names were puzzled. They said, every living thing has a single name: the marigold, pansies, and lily, the oak tree, sequoia, and pine. God must have a single name that is greater and more wonderful than all other names. Each person thought his name for God was the greatest. Each person thought her name for God was the very best. The farmer who called God source of life said, "This is the true name of God." The girl who called God creator of light insisted, "This is the most splendid name for God." The shepherd, soldier, and artist believed they each had the perfect name of God. But no one listened, least of all God. And so each person kept searching for God's name. The woman who cared for the sick called God healer. The slave who was freed from bondage called God redeemer. The grandfather's hair was white with the years called God Ancient One. The grandmother who was bent with age and sorrow called God Comforter. The young woman who nursed her newborn son called God Mother. The young man who held the hand of his baby daughter called God Father. And the child who was lonely called God Friend. All the people called God by different names. They tried to tell one another that their name was the best. The only name for God was the one that all other names were wrong. But no one listened, least of all God. And so each person kept searching for God's name. Then one day, the person who called God Ancient One, and the one who called God Friend, and the one who called God Mother, and the one who called God Father, all the people who called God by a different name came together. They knelt by a lake that was clear and quiet like a mirror, God's mirror. Then each person who had a name for God looked at the others who had different names. They looked into God's mirror and saw their own faces and the faces of all the others. And they called out their names for God: Source of life, Creator of light, Shepherd, Maker of peace, my rock, Healer, Redeemer, Ancient One, Comforter, Mother, Father, Friend, all at the same time. At that moment, the people knew that all the names for God were good, and no name was better than another. Then all at once, their voices came together, and they called God One. Everyone listened, most of all, God.
Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we? First line, one more time. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
From the inspiration section of our Unitarian Universalist Association Covenant. Direct experiences of transcending mystery and wonder are primary sources of Unitarian Universalist inspiration. These experiences open our hearts, renew our spirits, and transform our lives. We draw upon and are inspired by sacred, secular, and scientific understandings that help us make meaning and bring life into our values. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary and difficult and joyous times. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which these sources were created and are currently practiced. Grateful for the experiences that move us, aware of the religious ancestries we inherit, and enlivened by the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom.
So I'm going to start today with by sharing a story from many years ago. Back when I was a modern dancer, I had a friend who was a visual artist, a potter, a painter. He did ink drawings as well. Even his handwriting was a work of art. Abstract art, because it was exquisitely beautiful, but totally illegible. This friend was an avant-garde artist. I have a piece of his that's from a series of white-on-white paintings, a kind of bas relief, so that the abstract image is made with the raised texture of the paint. All of this is just to give you a sense of who I'm talking about, the kind of person who appreciates Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko rather than one of those people who think any child could make a Jackson Pollock. So this friend, this avant-garde artist, once asked me do you just grab your clothes at random? Or do you deliberately choose them to go together? Oh, I choose them because I feel they go together, I responded. That's marvelous, he said, a huge smile on his face. Do you see what's happening? Are you getting what I'm throwing down? He asked this question because I mix colors and patterns in unorthodox ways, so unorthodox, he thought I might pick them at random. My avant-garde artist friend could not fathom how I could put together my pairings of patterns and colors. That it seemed like there was no method to what looked like madness. But my friend loved this. Loved that there was a method to my madness that he couldn't discern, couldn't make sense of. He basically called me an artistic genius. Fast forward to the present. I believe I hide my artistic genius pretty well now. I mean, as a minister, I think I dress pretty much in the normal white male minister business casual uniform. I might let my crazy show every once in a while. It wouldn't surprise me if my quirk has peeked through once or twice. An out there pattern here, an odd color choice there.
Yeah, Taylor Swift.
But I'm talking about my fashion though. But at home, off the job, I let my freak flag fly. I mean, I'm still dressing like that 20-something modern dancer. And my child, who sees these fashion choices on a regular basis, has dubbed it ransom note fashion. I know, some of you are probably confused right now. You're thinking of kidnappings or other reasons people write ransom notes. But bring to mind a ransom note, the kind from an old-time movie or a children's mystery, how it's cut out of many different letters in different fonts, with lowercase letters at the beginning of sentences and capital letters in the middle of words, all to disguise the identity of the note's author. That's how my child describes my fashion. Ransom note fashion. Seemingly random, just like it was back in the day when my friend asked me that question. So I realized a few months ago that we might describe Unitarian Universalism as a ransom note religion. Because a defining feature of this faith is that we draw from multiple sources, from sacred sources, secular sources, scientific sources. And perhaps we should be careful about calling Unitarian Universalism a ransom note religion. There is a risk that it can be read as pejorative, that it might play into the hands of our critics who claim we lack a center, religious, ethical, or otherwise, when that couldn't be further from the truth. My child's mother, also a Unitarian Universalist minister, has pointed out that while all Christians read the Bible, Christians come to widely divergent views of what that Bible is telling them, right? Liberal, conservative. In contrast, she points out that because UUs, as a covenantal faith, are grounded in shared values, we tend to have greater consistency in our worldview. We're open to wide worldviews, but we tend to have greater consistency about those values and where they lead us. So there is a method to Unitarian Universalism, even though to the outside eye it might look like madness. And I think it's important to note that we only draw from the world's religious teachings, and I mean, all good science is aligned with our values, but there's pseudoscience out there. Presently, and in the past, it had more sway, that proposed to be scientific and supported racism and sexism. So we do not pull from those parts, those pseudoscience, or from religious teachings that are patriarchal or misogynistic or homophobic or racist. We don't draw from them because they don't align with our values. And I would say the very fact that we draw from multiple sources is an expression of our shared values, that those shared values compel us to draw from multiple sources. If we're saying, as we do for our justice value, that we're committed to being diverse, multicultural, beloved community, and dismantling racism and other oppressive systems and structures, then we need to draw from sources that are going to help us do that. And we need to respect multiple cultural perspectives. I could go through each of the values and show how it connects, but I'll let you contemplate on their own. But I think it's remarkable how we draw from multiple sources, and also that we have these shared values that center us and guide us in how we live our lives. So I invite you to raise an imaginary glass to Unitarian Universalism, our Ransom Note Religion. Cheers. Cheers. Salud. All right. That concludes part one of the sermon. But I want you to get your money's worth. So here comes part two. So the other defining feature is that we embrace wide theological diversity. There are people here today who believe in God, though what that means to them is probably differs quite a bit. There are people who are agnostic, there are people who are atheists, there are polytheists, right? There's a wide range, and we love that. Well, at least we say we want theological diversity, and we mean what we say, or at least we mean to mean what we say. But especially as you use, we've likely put some time and effort into crafting our worldview. And in doing so, we've come to some conclusions about what does and doesn't make sense to us. And we may even feel passionate about these conclusions. We might even call them convictions. And there is nothing wrong with that. Well, there's nothing wrong with that so long as we hold it with humility. Nothing wrong with that so long as it doesn't get in the way of our practice, as described in our value of pluralism, of embracing our commonalities and our differences with curiosity, respect, and a spirit of love. In my time as a chaplain, I did a 2-year stint as a chaplain resident at a level 1 trauma hospital, 2 years more than the summer of chaplaincy training required of all Unitarian Universalist ministers. In my time as a chaplain, I noticed something. Every person constructs a worldview that's like a constellation made of stars, each star serving a complementary or counterbalancing role in relation to the other stars. I gave a bit of an example of this last Sunday when I shared that Calvinist Christianity has a high theology to counterbalance their low theological anthropology, which means that they believe humans are so thoroughly sinful they really can't save themselves from sin. But luckily, even though they don't have much power, God is super powerful and very involved in their life and saves them through God's abundant grace. You see how those work well together in that constellation? And you use, in contrast, most you use, whether they're atheist or theist or polytheist, most you use, even with that theological diversity, tend to have a low theology counterbalanced by a high theological anthropology, meaning most of us don't believe in a God who does a whole lot in the world, if we believe in God at all. But that's okay, because that's counterbalanced by our faith in human beings' ability to be good and to make the world a place where we can all flourish. So those examples have only 2 stars in the constellation, but most people's worldviews have more stars than that, with a more complex relationship between the many stars that make up their constellation. And each person's worldview works for them. Each of these constellations is a work of art. It might look like ransom note fashion from the outside, but it is exquisitely designed to guide them through their life and to help them when life gets really hard, which it does, right? Always. For all of us, at some point, life gets really, really hard. So I want to tell you about a letter, or an essay in the form of a letter, written by a friend of New Zealand's unofficial poet laureate, James K. Baxter. Baxter is a fascinating figure, part of the countercultural movement of the 1960s in New Zealand. And near the end of his life, he founded a kind of hippie-like commune called New Jerusalem. His series of poems from that time, the Jerusalem Sonnets, were some of my favorite poems when I was in college 30 years ago. So this friend of his, unfortunately I don't remember his name or where in the many cardboard boxes I've stashed the essay, this friend wrote a letter to Baxter after his death. And you may be surprised to learn, given I just described his 1960s countercultural hippie commune living self, that Baxter was a convert to Catholicism and a very devout, if somewhat eccentric, Catholic. This friend, however, was an atheist. We might even call him a devout atheist. So this friend, in this letter, asked James Baxter, posthumously, how he could possibly believe in God. And the friend says he knows how James Baxter would reply, that he would say, "It's cold outside, and I need a coat." Beautifully poetic, right? And as a lover of Baxter's poetry, I could imagine him saying this. I mean, it's one of the wonders of Baxter's poetry that he could express really deep truths about human existence in exactly this folksy kind of way. So the friend writes, "You're an intelligent person. How can you believe in God?" "Well, my friend, it's cold outside, and I need a coat." Now, the atheist friend is suggesting, rather pejoratively, do you see that? That he's suggesting that atheists are able to look reality in the face and brave the cold without a coat, without a need for magical thinking. Even though he's doing that poetic beauty. But I don't think that's true. I don't think that's how it works. I think an atheist needs the coat just as much as anyone else. It's just that for James Baxter, God was a good coat to keep him warm in the cold. And for his friend, atheism was a good coat for keeping him warm in the cold. Everyone's constellation is constructed to guide them through this life with its many joys and hardships, to help make sense of the world and to keep warm when it gets wicked cold outside. If we remember this, it helps us to be humble, helps us to embrace other people's theologies and other aspects of the worldview when they don't seem to make good sense to us, when they look like ransom note fashion from the outside, to embrace their viewpoint with curiosity, with respect, and in the spirit of love. That star in their constellation that doesn't make sense to us is keeping them warm. And that star is in dynamic tension with all the other stars in their constellation, which means that if one of those stars gets ripped away, the whole thing falls apart. And they're left unmoored, alone and weightless, floating away into the cold, dark, endless reaches of space. You don't want anyone to do that to you, and you really don't want to do it to anyone else. And they're not likely to let you anyway. If you try to do that, if you treat their perspective, theological or otherwise, with contempt, with disdain, with arrogant know-it-allness, they're going to do just exactly what you and I would do in that situation. Dig in our heels and refuse to cede any ground at all. Hold on even more tightly to our truth. Maybe even start to talk about it as the one and only truth, or as if it's the one and only truth. Now, it's also true that people's constellations can change over time. I saw that too in the hospital. Most often, a person's already constructed constellation served them well, kept them warm in the cold, supported them when life got really hard. But sometimes it didn't. And when that happened, they would work on altering their constellation, experimenting with moving stars around to make a new constellation, to find a new arrangement that felt true and beautiful and comforting and motivating. If you notice someone is in that process, feel free to share some generous thoughts about where they might move the stars. Generous and gently, as an invitation that they can take or leave. Now, I might be unusual. You know, just as some people have a fluid experience of their sexuality or gender identity, I have a fluid experience of my theology. When I was a ministerial intern, 10 years ago at a congregation outside Boston, a member of my internship committee coined the term kayak.com theology to describe this fluidity in my theological perspective. That's because I had said to the committee that I was less concerned with figuring out if something was true, was the truth, and instead would use whatever theology would best get me to my destination, right? Like using kayak to find a flight, including changing that theology from month to month or even day to day if I had a new destination that a different theology would do a better job of getting me to. If you're a little confused or even a little concerned, it's not that deep. It just means, for example, I don't know if there's a God, but I do know that praying to God, using pretty traditional language, has helped me get through some hard times, has been a coat in the cold. So I'm good with doing that when it's helpful. But at another point, in another context, when I don't find God or prayer to be helpful, I'll drop God. I'll drop God like a bad habit and take up another viewpoint, one that's better suited to getting me where I'm trying to go. And it works for me because I don't think I know if there's a God or not, and mostly I don't think I know much of anything with certainty. So if a spiritual practice is helpful for a time, why not use it? Maybe when I'm praying to God, I'm really just reaching inward to my own deepest wisdom. Who knows? And who cares? If praying to God helps me connect with my own deepest wisdom, even though God doesn't actually exist, praying to God still worked. It still helped me through the hard time. It was still a coat in the cold. And personally, I'm good with that. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not sharing this kayak.com theology with you because I expect or even want you to adopt it for yourself. But I am sharing it because it might be helpful to adopt it when relating to other people. If another person holds a theological perspective that doesn't make sense to you or you disagree with, but it's helping them make sense of the world, helping them make it through hard times, maybe try saying to yourself, or even to them, I'm so happy you have that airplane to get on. See you in Chicago. May it be so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Please rise now in body and spirit and join in our closing words. As we extinguish our chalice, I invite you to join me now in our community blessing with these words from David Bambach. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all of our differences and beneath all of our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity. Now that we have gathered together in this welcoming and inclusive spiritual home, let us go out into the world inspired to share our values.